Good morning, ladies and gents. I don't want to try to have to record this too many times, and I forgot that I can't go back for whatever reason. Once I've recorded a slide, I can't go back. I can only go forward. So I need to remember that. This is going to be two videos. The first part is going to be what we went over in class today, and then the second part is going to be what we didn't get to go over but still needs to be covered and will still be on your test tomorrow and Friday. I know it's a lot, and I know you guys are really tired. Heck, I'm tired too. Um, you know, I understand. I have to restart my thesis this week. Well, I have to not restart the work, but I have to begin working on it again, and that for me has taken a really big toll. So I understand. It's a quick turnaround from last test, but you guys got it. I'm really proud of you. I'm really proud of you all. Keep working, on your assignments that you haven't completed yet. Remember, those zeros are just placeholders for now if you haven't done it, and I'll give you guys full credit. There's no need to worry about that, but put your best foot forward, right? And let's keep chugging along. So in the lectures, Monday, Tuesday, and today, right, we've really been looking at how America is slowly involving themselves more and more in this war, without actually declaring war on any country, right? And we looked on Tuesday how the relationship between America and Japan, Japan has invaded Indochina, and America has put all those embargoes, specifically on oil is one of the big ones, and Japan is going to lash out and retaliate against America, and that retaliation results in Pearl Harbor. Well, we're going to look at a couple photos. I have to remember I can't go back, so we'll talk about those photos in a second. But looking at mobilizing the home front, America hasn't been in a wartime, hasn't been in war since World War One, right? So America has to transition itself back into a wartime state, and transitioning into a wartime state is not an overnight thing, right? This takes a couple weeks, a couple months. Even if it's really quick, it takes some time. But one of the big steps that people are going to take is that they're going to start volunteering themselves to government. There are going to be a lot of people that begin working in government. They're just there to do whatever the government needs them to do. They're essentially volunteers, but in order to distinguish themselves from peer volunteers, you have to be paid some sort of salary. So enter the term, what these people, these workers, become known as dollar-a-year men. And as the name implies, these workers, people that are working for the government, that want to help, that are essentially volunteers, they are being paid $1 a year. So, these people are not in it for the paycheck. They're just in it to help government and to help, you know, do what needs to be done in order to help America transition into this wartime state, help America win, um, you know, start fighting, and hopefully, by the end of it, win this war, right? Another big step another big step for America is now the economy has to turn into a wartime economy, and this is what gets America out of the depression, right? The government is going to control the majority of the economy and where money goes, who money goes to, and all of that good stuff. So one of the things that's going to happen is, the government is going to give out a bunch of loans to a bunch of big businesses, and those big businesses are going to start manufacturing military equipment and supplies. So Ford Motors is a really good example of this. Ford is going to begin producing tanks and cars and planes. They're going to turn their car factories into factories that pump out armored military equipment, right? So anything with a motor, Ford is going to have uh, some, they're going to be constructing these armored vehicles for the military. Um, and so when businesses are able to do that, when they're able to um, begin producing something that has a lot of need, they're able to put money back into the economy. And this is what, it helps America get out of the Depression, what actually helps the economy reboot itself in a lot of ways. War can be really good for an economy, it can also be really, really bad. In the case of America, America doesn't get invaded, so it's actually fairly good sometimes, right? So now we can look at these photos, and so this is probably one of the most famous photos that has come out of Pearl Harbor, and it's the explosion of the USS Shaw. And the next photo, we're going to look at the aftermath of it, but I kind of want you to just look at the photo and really think about what does the photo entail. So you see this explosion, you see this big fireball, but with photography in particular, there's a lot that isn't able to be conveyed. So everyone that morning on December 7th was working, right? Everyone in the military, it's a naval base. Everyone is on their ships. Everyone is in their airstrips, wherever they need to be. So this explosion, what you don't see, what we're not able to look at directly, is the loss of life in that fireball, right? The explosion of the Shaw is really, really big. It's not as big as the USS Arizona, but when you're looking at this, you can see, I'm pointing to the screen like you guys can see what I'm pointing at. But those little outshoots, those little streams of fire, that's probably metal that's being tossed along in the air that's on fire. And because these ships are carrying a lot of fuel, right, a lot of oil, a lot of gas, it just floats on top of the water. So the water catches on fire, and there's going to be a lot of sailors that get thrown overboard from an explosion, and they either drown because they're incapacitated, or they drown because they have no real way to swim above the surface because the surface is on fire, right? So these are the things that when you're looking at historical photographs, you need to consider what you're not able to directly see. So this is the one of the aftermath photos. So after the Japanese have left, you can see the fire is still going on, especially when it's flaming oil on water. It takes a really long time to put out. It's not a very simple thing to do. And one of the things that makes Pearl Harbor pretty destructive is that the common practice at the time was to put all of your planes in a single file line or group them together. And the thought behind that was, if they're all in the same place, if they're all ready to take off, if there's intact, you just get in your plane, turn it on, and take off, right? The problem with this is that those lines of planes, if you manage to explode one and it has fuel in it, it just sets off a chain reaction that, it destroys all the other planes. So you can kind of see, again, pointing at the screen, like you can see what I'm pointing at. In the foreground, you see a soldier, sailor that's probably hunking around either a piece of metal or something else, right? And you see the plane, pretty much the shell of the plane in the foreground, and of course the fireball that's still going on in the background, that people, maybe they're not even able to put it out at the moment. They're dealing with other bigger fires. We just don't know, right? But again, something that you should be considering when you're looking at historical photos, what isn't able to be conveyed on camera. So we're not going to look at that. That's a discussion, but it's a good discussion. Just don't have time to look at it, and also we can't look at it here. So now we can look at the American home front. What's going on back at home? Dang, it's already 10 minutes in. I need to pick it up. So once again, as happens in all war, women are now having to step into the roles and responsibilities that predominantly belong to the men, right? And these women are going to do wonderful, wonderful work. It's really, really impressive what the women do during this time, during World War II. So more than 350,000 women are going to join the military in various key supporting roles. And then over 6 million are going to go join the industrial workforce. And of course, there's still a ton of men who are, saying women shouldn't be doing this, essentially. So in order to help people get over this, in order to promote women in the workforce, I have to sign out of work. I apologize. And Miss Gonzalez, shout out to you. You just sent me a Canvas message. I'm wasting your guys' time. I apologize. You can skip probably a couple minutes. Oh, okay. Well, that's not good. We'll deal with that in 2 seconds. Anyways, sorry. So in order to get over this, the government's going to issue some propaganda that revolves around this character called Rosie the Riveter. You've probably seen Rosie the Riveter. I actually don't. For some reason, I don't have a photo of her in this. I don't know why, but you've probably seen her. She's wearing, this red hat, this red kind of bandana. I believe it's spotted. And she's, flexing. And the thing about Rosie the Riveter is that it conveys this really interesting duality of the strong working woman for the war. Rosie the Riveter is very strong, but still very feminine. She's conveyed as someone who excels at her job both as a riveter, which is really, really labor intensive, but also as a mother. So Rosie is helping men and other women, get over kind of the stigma by showing that women are really strong, but they can still be very feminine. And that their role and responsibility in the household isn't necessarily changing because they've taken up a new role and responsibility in industry, right? So that's really, really interesting to look at and to think about. Now, African Americans, about 1 million men and women are going to serve in the armed forces during the war, but all of them are in segregated units. Even in military uniform, they face the same racial prejudice that they, while at home, right? I guess we'll see about testing tomorrow. Anyways, many who don't join the military, African Americans who don't join the military, they will search for better industrial jobs, mostly up north. So a lot of those Southerners who maybe they've just haven't been able to move out of the South yet, right? Even during a time like World War I and after, they're going to go find jobs in the industrial North. But as we've discussed, when a big migration like that happens, once African Americans start competing with whites for resources in a place, racial tensions that are underneath the surface already are going to flare up again. And so there are going to be race riots that break out across northern cities because of this. But African Americans will serve valiantly for their country, and there's going to be great war stories that come out of it, like the Tuskegee Airmen. If you've never watched the movie Red Tails, watch the movie Red Tails. It's about the Tuskegee Airmen. It's really quite good. Now, moving on to Japanese Americans also have a pretty hard fight in the war. So even before Pearl Harbor happened, Washington was very concerned about Japanese spies or saboteurs. And once Pearl Harbor happens, FDR on February 14th, 1942, FDR will sign the Executive Order 9066. And what the Executive Order did, and I missed my time to punch out, whatever. And what the Executive Order did is that it made what is known as military exclusion zones along the west coast of California, Washington, and Oregon. And what these military exclusion zones did is that the military had full control of everything, of everyday life. They had full control of. But within a few weeks and a few months, for American safety, quote unquote, the Lieutenant General John L. DeWitt will order that the Japanese be evacuated from their homes. And they will be evacuated and placed into 10 different relocation camps throughout the western United States. There was no due process, there was no trial, there's no actual evidence that these people were spies or saboteurs. About 60 to 70% of those that are incarcerated, that are placed in these camps, are American citizens. The children of Japanese born in America. They are American citizens, and the only crime they've committed is being of yellow skin. So these people, it's about 120,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans who were forcibly removed from their homes. Some of these people, some of these families, they got a month's warning. Some of them got a week's warning. Some of them got a couple days warning that they had to pack up, meet at a designated site, and then be bussed over to their new home for the next few years. And they had no idea that they were going to be incarcerated for this long. These Japanese, overnight, they lost everything. So you can only bring what you can pack within a couple suitcases. And so all of their possessions, they either try to sell it. If they couldn't sell it, they try to store it. If you couldn't store it, then it was just left. And what ends up happening is that a lot of Japanese are going to come back home after the war is over and find that some of their homes were destroyed and then rebuilt. It's really, really tragic. These Japanese who have been in America for who knows how long, they've built businesses and successful farms, all of it, 20, 30 years worth of work gone overnight. And there's going to be Japanese who join the military who are 17, 18, 19 years old, and they want to prove that they're American. So they go join the military and they fight for their country and they fight against the Japanese overseas. And the all Japanese unit, their motto was "Go for broke," because all they wanted to do was prove to everyone else that they were just as American as their white brother. Right? They were they're doing everything they could for that to happen. It's really, really quite sad that these soldiers, they will come home and they will still see their parents behind barbed wire. It's a really, really hard time for the Japanese Americans. And the all Japanese unit is, I believe, the most decorated unit in U.S. military history. You know, it's what Washington will say and do for again, American safety. Um, it's complete violation of American rights. You know, you can think about it and do it with it as you will, but I will say, when you're thinking about Japanese Americans and Japanese internment and relocation, uh, look out in today's world and see if this is happening again. One of the reasons we learn history is so we don't repeat it, right? Like, that's one of the, it's cliche, but it's true. We learn history in hopes that we don't repeat it. Um, and so I would say, you know, learning about this, and then if you want to do any more research, as I'm doing, um, there are actions being taking place right now, that is eerily similar. I'm telling you, that is eerily similar to what is happening, or to what happened to the Japanese Americans in World War II. So, you know, these are some of the things you need to think about when you're looking at history and when you're discussing history. How can you apply it today? You know, we're idiots. Like, we're all, you know, we're all arrogant and we're all ignorant and we all make mistakes. But hopefully we make those mistakes less, right? Um, and I can tell you right now, it's happening. It's happening again, and it's not okay. Um, yeah, that's enough of my rant for that. Been on the slide way too long. My nose is so itchy. I'm so sorry that I'm scratching every 2 seconds. It happens when I do presentations. I don't know why. So here's some women at work. Uh, you know, their coveralls in industry. Also, we have plenty of women who join the military as, um, again, pointing at the screen, um, as messengers. So they decode or they write down messages, right? They're telegraphers. Um, I don't know Morse code, but Morse code is handy to know. And maybe we should all learn it a little bit. So the yeah, riveting, really, really hard work. And as this poster says, my head is kind of covering, you know, women in the war can't win without them. Very, very much true. The American industry would have collapsed if the women did not step up to take the men's positions. It would have completely collapsed. And of course, Japanese Americans, again, 5, 10, 20, 30 years of work all gone in one night with nothing to do. If you look at the top right, is a family. You know, they've packed what they can, their bags, and they've got identification tags around their neck, and that's how they would be identified, was with these tags. Um, you know, Japanese will say it's very dehumanizing to be considered just as a number, and you know, it's something that the Jewish people will say, that when they survive the Holocaust, they will say the same thing. It's very, very dehumanizing when you're just considered a number. Very, very dehumanizing. So, moving on, a plan for war. The relationship between the big three, the Grand Alliance, so Stalin, Churchill, Roosevelt, very, very complex. But remember, they all have the same end goal in mind. There's just a lot of questions on how Hitler's going to be defeated. There's a lot of different questions on how things should proceed and how things should go about. Um, but there are some basic principles that they can agree on, and in some fashion or another. So, firstly, the very first principle that they all agree on is that Germany will be first. The focus will be first on Germany, and the rationale behind this is that if Britain and Russia lose, if Britain and Russia fall, then America stands alone against both Germany and Japan, which is just it's a two-front war that would be really, really bad, and America wouldn't really be able to handle it all that well. Secondly, um, all three of them will agree on the demand of an unconditional surrender from both the Germans and the Japanese. And here's the main reason why. When Hitler was rising to power, he convinced the German people that it was not the Germans who lost the war, who lost in World War I. It was not the Germans, the German people who lost the war, but the German government gave up. Um, Hitler was able to convince the German people that if they just keep on fighting during this war, that they would win, and that the Germans would have won during World War I if the German government did not just give up. Um, so FDR and Stalin and Churchill, they want to make sure that the German people know they're fully defeated. Right? They want to make sure that every single person in Germany fully understands that their country has lost. To make sure that something like what Hitler did with his speech and rhetoric doesn't happen again. So, one of the things that they're going to, moving on into a second front, one of the things that the big three for the longest time cannot agree on is a second front. So Stalin and the Soviets are struggling. They're losing a lot of men. They're losing a crap ton of men. They're running out of supplies. Stalin and the Soviets, they need some help. And Stalin will plead to, oh my gosh, freaking nose. Golly. Guys, I don't know what to do, man. So Stalin's going to plead to Roosevelt and Churchill, asking that a second front be opened, so the pressure off of the Soviets a little bit of the pressure can be relieved. So FDR and Churchill are going to talk about this for a long time. They just can't decide where that second front should be opened. So Stalin believed it should be opened from France. The second front should start in France. And the reason, well, it scared Churchill like crazy. The reasoning behind it is that Stalin believed that if an invasion of France happened, then like in World War I, Russia would be able to sandwich Germany between France and themselves. But for Churchill, this really scared him. He didn't think that the Americans or the British were really ready for that. So instead, they decided to open a second front in North Africa, where the Italian and German armies were not nearly as strong. Yeah, I guess there's extra details during class I went over, but none of it's really uber necessary. So hopefully you're all good on that. A lot less time spent on that slide than the others. Okay, now we can start looking at some more battles. So invading Russia is going to be one of Hitler's worst mistakes. We can start actually looking at why Operation Barbarossa and the invasion of Soviet Russia was such a turning point in the war. So Hitler is a military genius. The problem is that Hitler, one, had a really big ego, and two, he was crazy. And Stalingrad, after his defeat in Russia, Hitler's going to lose his mind. Like, he doesn't know what to do with himself anymore. So he's just going to kind of start throwing darts at the board and hoping something sticks after this. So the three-pronged attack into Russia was initially working for the Germans. The problem was that Hitler thought winning Russia would be over within a couple of months. Another thing that happens is that the Russian winter comes early, slightly early, and the Germans aren't prepared for it. They're fully dressed in summer clothing. Remember, they started their operation in June, July, right? They're in their summer clothing. They have summer equipment. They are not prepared for the Russian winter. So the Russians are just going to overrun the Germans. Within a couple of months, by early 1943, the Germans will be pushed out of Russia completely. Right, the Battle of Stalingrad. It's on the slide, but we don't really talk about it. We just kind of talk about Russia as a whole. But the Battle of Stalingrad is going to be this really long, drawn-out battle where the Russians, they're instructed, if the man in front of you dies, you pick up his weapon and begin firing. The Russians had so many men, they had too many men and not enough supplies. So when the person in front of you dies, their equipment, you just pick it up. And the Russians, they're going to lose so many troops. The Russians lose more troops than any of the Allies or any of the Axis forces. But they have so many people, and the Germans aren't prepared for the Russian winter. The Germans are going to be pushed out of Russia. And it's a huge, huge loss for Hitler. Very, very big loss for Hitler. While this is going on, the campaigns in North Africa they're not going to last very long. So the plan then, after America and Britain have captured North Africa, the plan is to attack Germany through the soft underbelly of Europe, and that's Sicily and Italy. The thing about the Italians is that they are very much lovers, not fighters. The Italians, in all honesty, are completely useless in this war. Utterly useless in this war. And so in July of 1943, Allied troops will land in Sicily, the tip of the boot of Italy. And by August 17th, the island was completely in Allied hands. And then in July, Hitler is going to start pulling his troops off the Russian line to supply the Italians, who have just been completely overrun. So really, hard-fought battles will ensue. Very quick door-to-door combat will ensue. And it's a long, drawn-out fight. But in July of 1944, the Allies will finally capture Rome, meaning Italy has fallen. And that's a really, really big for the Allies. Now we get to look at, this is the last thing we looked at, and then we'll look at actually some of the pictures. Gosh, I hope my nose settles the frick down. Yeah, golly, man. Okay, so the Battle of the Atlantic, and getting into D-Day. So the last step into beating Germany is a push into France. It's still a really, really scary thing, and it takes months and months of meticulous preparation in order for an invasion of France to even be considered plausible. So while waiting for the invasion date, looking at strategic bombing, while waiting for the invasion date, the Allies will start bombing Germany into submission. They want to break the German morale. They want to stop some of the production some of their production, it just doesn't work as well as they would have liked. But one thing that it does help is that the Germans now, their air force, the Luftwaffe, is extremely weak. Near the end of the war, the Luftwaffe, the thing that really held together Blitzkrieg, no longer exists. Their planes are crap. You know, their pilots, they don't have any pilots anymore. It's really kind of torn to shreds. So after the strategic bombing, the Luftwaffe is pretty much out of service at this time. So now we get to talk about D-Day. D-Day is the biggest turning point in the whole war. It was known as Operation Overlord, and it's one of the biggest gambles in military history. In the months leading up to the invasion, Allied forces will do everything they can to draw attention away from the actual landing site in Normandy. They convinced the Germans that the landing would happen at Calais, and Calais is the, I believe it's Dover. I could be tripping, but Calais is, there's a point between Britain and France, and Calais is the French city that it's the closest point. It's the closest stretch of land of what am I trying to say, guys? It's the closest. Yes, yes, it's the closest. Between Britain and France, it's the closest point. Is Calais. So it made sense that an invasion of Calais would take place. And this nose, I'm gonna rip my nose off. Anyways, like, and part of this attention-seeking thing is that a whole fake army was created. Like, barracks were set up, inflatable balloons were disguised as tanks. Like, they were inflatables that looked like tanks. It was quite an impressive feat. You guys remember, I didn't talk about this in class, and it's actually kind of funny. You guys remember General Douglas MacArthur? Douglas MacArthur, the guy that burned down Anacostia Flats during the Great Depression? Well, he's a great general, but he because of what he did, he was immediately punished by Hoover and Roosevelt. The first bit of action that he's going to see in this war is being the general commander of this fake army in Britain. Actually, I believe that's the case. I could be so wrong, and I'll be so mad at myself if I'm wrong about that. But I believe that was the case. Everyone is extremely worried about this operation. Eisenhower, the man on the screen talking to the paratroopers, who will become a president in the 50s, he carried around in his wallet a note to be circulated if the operation failed. And the note, the very end of it said, if any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. So let's actually get into D-Day. June 5th, 1944, around 16,000 paratroopers will attempt to land behind German enemy lines. And the point of this was they would push up. They would push so I'll explain it. So the next morning, so June 5th at night, the Allies will land all those paratroopers behind German lines. 6:30 a.m., June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious assault or a largest amphibious landing in history. Some 5,300 Allied troops and 370,000 British, American, and Canadian troops will land at the 5 beaches of Normandy, France. as the transport ships lay down their doors, the shooting immediately begins. There will be American and British warships that are firing, shots and shells at German bunkers. And these German bunkers have machine gun nests, and these machine guns are just firing every single second at the troops that are landing at the beaches. German artillery a couple of miles behind the beaches are going to be firing down at the Allied troops. And on the beach, there's going to be mines and barbed wire and these things called hedgehogs, and I'll show you what a hedgehog looks like. And it's just a bloody, bloody mess. It's not a long battle. It's only a couple of hours, but it's incredibly, incredibly brutal. If you go watch Saving Private Ryan, the very first scene in Saving Private Ryan is the landing at D-Day, and veterans and historians have deemed it to be probably the most accurate depiction of the D-Day landings. There were plenty of veterans who watched Saving Private Ryan, and they had to leave in the middle of that scene because they were getting quite literally, I mean, you might laugh because, dark humor, but they were quite literally getting flashbacks to their time landing at the beaches. It was that intense of a movie scene, but also that accurate. So these men, they're getting shot at, and a lot of them will die almost immediately. A lot of them will die before they even get to step foot out of the transport ship. In order to avoid being shot at, a lot of these men will throw themselves overboard and try to swim and wade their way onto to the beach. The problem became, if you landed flat on your back, it was a 70-pound ruck pack. It was 70 pounds of equipment. And if you landed on your back, the pack would drag you down and you would drown unless you got yourself free of that. Yeah, it was intense. It was ridiculous. The paratroopers that landed the night before, you have the landing forces that are going on the beach, and then the paratroopers behind the enemy lines are starting to close in and sandwich, the Germans and the German line. A lot of those paratroopers, those artillery nests that were a few miles behind the beaches, shelling the beach, paratroopers are going to go and attack those and help their boys out by shutting those down, by invading those German nests, shutting them down and destroying those guns. It takes literally with minutes before the beach is completely filled with bodies and blood and shrapnel and bullet casings. You can still, it's hard nowadays, but even to this day, you can still find bullet casings from the D-Day invasion at Normandy. There are plenty of people who get metal detectors and they go trying to find those. Yeah. Goodness gracious, more than 10,000 allies will die before the beachhead is secured. It's a lot. It's really, really hard fighting. I gotta make sure that I'm sorry this is so long. But we can look at a couple photos really quick before we before we wrap up. So this is the Normandy invasion. Did I really say 5 beaches? I thought it was 5 beaches. Could be just 3. But what we really want to look at is these photos. So you can see these men, they're wading their way through the water, and all of that smoke, it's not clouds, it's literally gunfire, and the smoke from shells, and the smoke from explosions. And you see these men, they're wading their way onto the beach. And, at this time, everyone's firing at each other. it's absolute chaos. It's ridiculous, right? More men wading their way through water. So if you look on the right, you have those two men, and in between those two men, that's a hedgehog. It's so vehicles can't pass. It provides a little bit of cover, but its main thing is just so vehicles can't pass. There's just welded together steel beams, so they're very strong. You can't. It's hard to move them. Yeah. So this is Omaha Beach, June 7th. The beachhead is secured, and you can see these paratroopers who are, marching up the hills. Within the coming days, tons and tons of military equipment and supplies are going to be put on the beach, and the invasion of France has been completed. It's a great success. It was a really, really great success, and it is the biggest turning point of the war, because this is the last thing the Allies needed to do in order to defeat the Germans. It's a huge blow to the Germans, a huge blow to Hitler, but it's a really big morale booster for the Allies and the Allied forces. So I think that's it for this video. Thank Lord. Sorry it took so long, guys. And then I'll upload this and I'll send the link, and then the second part, what is last and what is left, will I'll go over that in the next video. And yeah, I'll see you guys then.